Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today we're going to cover Jungle Skarner in the newly arrived patch 6.17.
My stinger brings ugly death.
In patch 6.16, Skarner was the jungler with the highest win rate of all the champions, and I don't think that's going to change in 6.17. Skarner starts off pretty weak, but once he gets his jungler item in a Sheen, he starts doing a lot of damage. Skarner's one of those junglers that gets stronger as the game progresses, and he's got a game-changing ultimate. A well-timed ultimate can save either your AD carry or pull a high kill priority target into your team, deleting them from the team fight. You have fast jungle clear and really strong ganks when you are level 6. Your ganks are relatively weak early on, but since we can get through the jungle so fast, we can get that level 6 and start pulling off some amazing ganks. We then also have a mix of magical and physical damage. This means that the enemy tanks could have a little bit of trouble itemizing against us effectively. Last is the fact that we are one of the best champions at chasing down the enemy. With the range boost from our W and the slow from our E, we can close massive gaps on targets, slow them down, and catch up to them. Now, although we have all this movement speed, we don't have an actual gap closer, so we can still be kited relatively easy against the right targets. We are then also squishy until we get some items. Now, we'll get our jungle item first and then probably a Trinity Force second, but then we finally start getting tanky. Until this time frame, don't try to pull off shit too ridiculous, you'll still die relatively quick. As for our last con, well, our ultimate is countered by Quicksilver Sash. Generally, it's only going to be the AD carry and possibly the AP carry getting this item, so you might have to target a bruiser instead, but this will be completely fine, because you will be able to save your AD carry at the same time. For our Masteries, we go 18 Resolve and 12 Cunning, grabbing Strength of the Ages as our Keystone Mastery. By far the best keystone on Skarner in my opinion, the extra 300 health is just really nice on a tanky champion. Other than that, you pretty much just want to focus on getting as tanky as possible, and the tenacity right above Strength of the Ages is really nice so we don't get kited as bad. I prefer to go 12 Cunning instead of Ferocity because I really like the health and mana return on kills and assists. It is perfectly viable, however, to go 12 Ferocity if you want the attack speed and all that other great stuff. For our runes, we go attack damage reds, armor yellows, magic resist per level blues, and attack speed quintessences. This is basically the exact same as an AD carry, the only difference is we get the MR per level instead of the flat magic resist. Now we'll be a tiny bit squishier early on, but when we do get our tanky items and we do have this scaling magic resist, we will become a beast in the mid and late game. Other than that, not too much else to say. Armor to reduce the damage you take in the jungle, and the attack damage and attack speed to get through the jungle as quickly as possible. As for our summoner spells, the first one is Smite. This allows you to buy your jungler item in the first place, and you can get through the jungle a lot quicker, considering you'll have a machete or a hunter's talisman. This, of course, is also great to secure Dragon and Baron. As for your next summoner spell, well, you'll either want Flash or Ghost. Flash is by far my favorite since you don't have an actual gap closer. Sure, you have movement speed, but you don't have a little dash or anything like that. You can then combine this with your ultimate to catch somebody off guard and pull them right into your team. Ghost can work really well as well, but we do have a boost in our W, so it's not that necessary. If their team is lacking slows and hard CCs though and can't really stop you when you are ghosted, this can be a fantastic summoner. I still usually stick to Flash myself, but if I know I'll be able to run through teamfights and whatnot, then perhaps I'll take Ghost instead. Next is Skarner's passive, Crystal Spires. So yeah, this thing is pretty awesome. When you are in the zone, you get huge movement speed and attack speed boost, and you even get some mana return. In the early game, these spires can help you clear very quickly without losing mana. When you then control the ones in river, these can give you some easy, uncontested scuttle crabs. When you're starting on the Gromp side of the jungle, aka blue, you'll want to pull him into the spire range so you can sit in there and have attack speed, movement speed, and keep your mana high as well. Whenever the enemy jungler ganks as well, you can go into their jungle, take control of their spires, so you can counter jungle a lot quicker. This is also great for escaping if the enemy jungler or any other laners show up. When you get into the late game, these can really help you engage as well. If you're forcing fights at Dragon and Baron, having this extra movement speed can get you onto a squishy target so you can land that grab and secure an easy kill for your team. Next up is your Q, Crystal Slash. The main use of this ability is to give you Sheen procs. It has a really low cooldown that gets even lower as you auto attack, making it great to get off those Sheens. This is pretty much why you take either a Trinity Force or an Iceborne Gauntlet in every single Skarner build there is. In the jungle, it will also apply Hunter's Talisman to every monster in the camps, which will keep your health topped off. In teamfights and skirmishes, however, it provides relatively little damage, besides of course that extra damage from your Sheen. Next is your W, Crystalline Exoskeleton. This is a great ability as it gives you a nice shield and movement speed boost. This scales with your max HP, and it starts to become very hard to take off when you have a couple tank items. This is great for absorbing poke and chasing down enemies that are fleeing. One thing to note is that the movement speed increases over time, so you'll want to activate it a second before you actually start going, so you have a lot of movement speed so you can catch them off guard. All in all, a pretty solid ability which will actually get you in positions to use your ultimate. So here is what I would call our most important ability, our E, Fracture. This provides a slow and a stun for peeling and catching carries in team fights. This then gets even better since it will provide you with your passive's movement speed and attack speed boost for a very short amount of time. It then also resets its cooldown by 1 second for each champion you stun and 2 seconds when you ultimate. You can then chain CC people in team fights with this and your ult. When you're trying to escape melee champions, you can also shoot this behind you, then go in for a stun and get all that movement speed to get away. This is by far our most important ability. It provides us with so much, and therefore, we max our E first. So last but certainly not least, the ability that makes Skarner the pain in the ass he is, his ultimate, Impale. In short, this is one of the deadliest CCs in the game, and landing it on a squishy or bruiser means pretty much certain death unless they have a Quicksilver Sash. Now you're going to have to decide how you want to use this ability. There's obviously the very aggressive engaging way and the more defensive peel. I personally don't really like opening fights with this unless, obviously there's a Caitlyn right in the front or something that I can pull in for a very easy kill, but generally I like to peel for my AD carry with this ability. Having something like a Zed or a Talon jump onto your backline, this doesn't really matter when you're Skarner because you can grab them, you can instantly delete him, and he'll do absolutely nothing. Who you're using this ability on depends entirely on the enemy team, but it also depends on if they have Quicksilver Sashes or not. It can completely change in the actual game. For our ability order, we start, of course, by maxing our ultimate, Impale, and then move into our E, Fracture. We then move into our Crystalline Exoskeleton for the awesome movement speed and shield that this ability provides. Last, we leave our Q, Crystal Slash. This really honestly is only good for proccing Sheen. Some people prefer maxing Q first, but E is much more consistent damage and also provides a more reliable CC, so I honestly don't really understand it. Now it can still work, it is viable, but you'll want to make sure you're maxing your W second in every case for its movement speed. For our jungle routes, we'll want to start at either Gromp or Krugs. Gromp is the best one because we can aggro the Gromp and move towards our Spire and sit in the edge. We will then of course get all of that extra attack speed, movement speed, and mana regeneration. We'll want to smite Gromp so we get that nice poison, then take our blue, wolves, raptors, and then smite red. We can then move on to the Scuttle Crab, taking control of the Spire, and then look for a gank. So when we start on red side, we start at Krugs, and we will need a leash here due to the fact that we aren't in the range of a Spire. We'll want to smite our red. Usually I don't need to smite Krugs with a leash, but sometimes you might need to. Either way, we'll then smite our raptors as well, and look for a quick early gank with our red buff. Afterwards, we can take our Scuttle Crab, move on to our blue buff, wolves, Gromp, and whatnot. Early game is where Skarner is weakest. So weak in fact that you can only really counter gank pre-6 if they have a weak early game jungler. If they have something like Lee Sin or Udyr, you're going to have to focus on farming, you're not going to stand a chance. Take Scuttle Crabs whenever you can to help with vision, ward the enemy jungle, counter jungle if possible, and attempt to gank. Once you hit level 6, start ganking whenever your ultimate is available. Then make sure you try to secure some early dragons whenever the opportunity presents itself. In the mid game, we want to look for any picks we can find using our Flash Ultimate Initiation. Forcing 45 teamfights in the mid game can start snowballing the game for your team. You have great control of Dragon and Baron with your passive, so make sure you're doing so. Then in teamfights, you're going to want to either initiate with your ultimate or sit next to your carries and stun anyone who goes for them with your E. Once the opportunity arises, nab an enemy carry with your ultimate for your team to delete. You're also going to need to decide if you want to go for a tanky build or a high damage build. Generally, I like to go for the tanky build, but in the off chance that we have a very, very tanky team, then I'll take the warrior enchantment on my jungle item and get some other sort of damage early on. In the late game, you're going to become really strong and be very tanky, yet do some pretty solid damage as well. Force objectives and control minion waves until you can actually start a fight. At this point in the game, some enemies may have a QSS, so make sure you're not wasting your ultimate on these targets. Pay attention to who has one. Ultimates on bruisers are very viable at this point as well, since you're going to have a lot of damage from your AD carry and AP carry. You don't need to be saving your ultimate in all cases for the AD carry in their mid laner. With the long death timers at this point in the game, make sure you're following up on kills with objectives, towers, inhibitors, or even the game. Since Skarner is so bad in the early game, generally our worst matchups are against very strong early game champions that can snowball out of control. Our first hardest matchup, however, is Trundle. He's great against tanky junglers like you, and also has great sustain. He clears the jungle fast, he can easily outduel you, and he's not very counter gankable for you. All you can really do is force ganks when you have your ultimate, otherwise you're going to need to avoid Trundle at all costs. So then there's Udyr, and he's hard for you because he has a very fast clear speed and insanely strong early ganks. Avoid him early on if you can, and counter gank him when you are level 6. Do not do this before level 6. Since Udyr is relatively good late game as well, you're also going to want to try to end the game pretty fast. So last, there is Elise. She's really hard early game, but once you do get some magic resist, she becomes really easy for you to deal with. The problem is getting to that point in the game. This is another champion you want to not counter gank early. Wait till mid game where she becomes really squishy so you're able to ultimate her when she engages. So last is the item build, and this is going to be the hardest one for me to do in a guide because Skarner can basically buy every single item in the game. His itemization is absolutely ludicrous, and there's probably a couple items that I should have on here that I just couldn't fit or forgot. Either way though, we start with a Hunter's Talisman, refillable potion, and a warding totem. For our core build, we're going to want to take either a Cinderhulk, Warrior, or Bloodrazor as our jungler item. Now I prefer the Stalker's Blade since he does need to catch up to people, but red is just as viable. So once we've selected our jungler item, we want either a Trinity Force or an Iceborne Gauntlet. Both are great items, but I definitely feel like Trinity Force is by far the best item of the two, and I see it taken pretty much 90% of the time, as opposed to the 10% of the time I see Iceborne Gauntlet taken. So once we've grabbed our first two items, we then of course want the Boots of Swiftness, as Skarner relies on his movement speed to close that gap onto targets. So yeah, for the damage item pool here, by far my favorite is the Titanic Hydra. This item also helps make you somewhat tankier as well, although it is a damage item. It still has a really nice health pool. As for the other damage items, I just don't like them near as much, but I see people take them now and again. I would say Sterak's Gauge is probably the next viable, since it also helps you remain tanky and add some damage as well. Wit's End, for the same reason. Sure, you don't get health, but you do get some magic resist, and the attack speed works really nice on Skarner too. Of course, there's also Frozen Mallet, health pool, some damage, and a nice way of sticking onto targets. Skarner doesn't really need it too much with all of his movement speed, but it's a nice thing to have. Black Cleaver, also kind of decent. You know, you can shred some armor for your teammates. Yeah, you're not full AD yourself, but it helps your team. Maw would be a great pick if you are against a high AP team, and you would like that extra shield when you do get low from magic damage. Then, believe it or not, Ginsu's is actually a pretty decent item as well on him. He makes great use of the AD and AP, and he does have a relatively good amount of attack speed since he does have a Trinity Force, and he does get that from his W as well. The downside of this item, of course, is the really high cost of the item. You could take it as a 5th or 6th item, but definitely not before then. So the tanky item pool is the one I use a hell of a lot more often than the damage pool. I'll usually add one of those into my build and then go for tanky stats. So up first is all of those armor items, the Dead Man's Plate, the Sunfire, the Randuin's, and the Thornmail. Oh, wait, and even the Frozen Heart. Now, of course, some of these do overlap. You're not going to want to take a Sunfire if you did go for a Cinderhulk, and you're not really going to want to take a Frozen Heart if you've already taken an Iceborne Gauntlet. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't take Frozen Heart too much at all on Skarner, but it is viable if there is a lot of attack speed champions. Or even just straight AD that do rely on auto attacks, it does shut down them as well. Dead Man's Plate, by far my favorite one since we do get the extra movement speed, but I do like Randuin's as well, since you do get that, reduced critical strike damage. It's really good against things like Yasuo and Jhin. Then if we do need some magic resist, we have the Banshee's Veil and the Spirit Visage. Spirit Visage is definitely the go-to and the better of the items, but there are sometimes a lot of CCs you do need to block, where the Banshee's Veil would come in really handy. God, I'm already at 3 minutes and 15 seconds of this friggin' item page. So quickly moving on, build 1 for a normal game, take your core, then go for a Dead Man's Plate, Spirit Visage, and a Titanic Hydra. You'll have really high damage from the Titanic Hydra and the Trinity Force, and some really nice tankiness for the Cinderhulk, Dead Man's Plate, and Spirit Visage. Then if you were against a really high AD team, you could take the Warrior as your jungler item and then the Iceborne Gauntlet. and of course the Boots of Swiftness. Then, since it is a full AD team in the scenario, we take a Sunfire Cape, Dead Man's Plate, and a Thord Mail. Yeah, have fun trying to kill us, you piece of shit. So yeah, that would do it. Thank you for those of you that just survived listening to me talk about an item build for 4 minutes on a champion who can use every single item in the entire game. But if you still managed to like this guide, please like and subscribe. We have lots and lots of League of Legends content to come out, and we would love to bring you along. We also do skin giveaways on our Twitter at egaming_TV, so if you do have Twitter, make sure you head over there, follow us, so you can win some free skins. Other than that, thank you guys a ton for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Peace!